Welcome to Great Tech Pros. I'm Wylie Blanchard, and today we're talking to Eric Schmuttenmaer, who is the Associate Vice President of Digital Technology and Innovation at AMITA Health. Eric has spent almost 20 years in the healthcare industry, focused on web development and marketing technology. Today, he's going to speak to us about building executive presence. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Wiley. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, sir. So I'm going to jump right in, sir. I work with a lot of developers, analysts, and they are always asking me about personal branding. So I'm curious, as it pertains to executive presence, why should a developer or someone who's experienced, an administrator, an analyst, why should they care about their executive presence?
It's a good question. Um, Building your executive presence, your personal brand. I believe that in order to having a strong executive presence, you need to influence those above you and below you, beside you, your leaders, everybody. So in order to influence people in your organization, your kid's baseball team, wherever it is, you need a set of skills that one would be listening, composure, how you communicate with others, how you learn, continuous learning. All of these key points is what builds your personal brand. And, for example, you can have, listening. You want to make sure that you listen and give your complete attention without distraction to a lot of people that you talk to. And if you sit there and if I'm talking to you and I'm looking at my watch, I'm looking at my phone, you're communicating that you're not listening, and that's going to hurt your brand. That's going to hurt your executive presence. That's one little example where listening with complete attention, without any distractions, is going to help your personal brand.
So at a Meta Health, when let's say a leader, so a technical lead, is working to prepare for a presentation, and let's say in front of the board or the executive leadership team, what efforts do you or someone on your team go through to prepare for, that type of presentation?
A lot of learning. I remember going into my first board presentation, and I had no idea what I was getting into. So it was very challenging knowing who my audience was and what I had to present to them. Because I'm an expert in my field, I'm an expert in what I was supposed to be presenting, but I didn't know how to present it. Like, what are these executives? Do they want really high level? Do they want details? I knew they wanted high level, but what does that mean? So when I had to learn this, when I had to learn something new, this is something new that I had to learn, I had to start small and build up to my speech that I was going to give to the CEO for the first time. And by doing that, I tried to understand who was in the meeting. Who am I going to be speaking to? Are they all C-level? Are there some directors? Are there some VPs in there? And what I learned was they were all C-level folks. Chief marketing officer, the chief operating officer, the chief medical officer. Everybody was in there, and I became quite intimidated that I gotta talk to these individuals. I don't know what they are, so I had to learn who they were and what they liked. So I would walk around and talk to those who reported up to each one of those, and got some information about how they like to be communicated to, what interested them in. At this time that I was going in, I was presenting a new Find a Doctor. So our organization was building a new front door, Find a Doctor, for our organization. So this is the only public-facing data for our physicians to be out there. So we want to make sure that we're representing our doctors correctly and that it's good. So how do I go in and convince them what the research that I've done and what I'm about to build is going to produce growth and work for our organization. So unfortunately for this first board presentation, I didn't have all my notes all cleaned up and knew who I was talking to. So I kind of got chopped down a little bit when I went in with my presentation. I had a layout. I didn't present my research that I had done before. I didn't think that was necessary. I just presented, this is the high level, look at what we've done with the search. This is what's changed from the other one, and this is why it will be a success. And when I went into that boardroom and presented, I had my flyers and handouts, and I went around, and they said, well, you know, I don't like this because of this, and I didn't have my research to back it up, and that hurt me. And I said, well, we did research, and I kind of stumbled through it, and I wasn't ready for that. And that's something that I learned for the next time, to bring my research and be a little bit more prepared for these on-the-cuff questions that they're going to have. So later I had to, you know, pull that together in more of a presentation form and send it off to them. I don't know how it was taken then, but in the end, it had good results. Basically the board meeting was a kind of a workshop for the CEO to say, you know, take this off, this is fine, move along. And I did it. We launched the website with the Find a Doctor, and it was a hit. It met a lot of the needs of our medical group and our aligned independents that we rely on. So that's what I would say with that.
So it sounds like what you're doing is you're going in with a pitch with in a lot of ways, it relates back to sales, because you have to show the value to the executive team so that you can gain buy-in, so that they're going to support the effort of your project, like your Find a Doctor project. With that in mind, though, you know, I've heard in the past that, you know, presenting to an executive team, to a leadership team, is kind of like sales, and because you have to go through a process of building trust. And in the sales process, I've personally learned that if I can build trust with someone, it's a lot easier for me to impress upon them the value of what I'm trying to sell to them, and then to get their buy-in into my pitch. And I'm curious whether you agree with that idea regarding, presenting to a leadership team is related to sales. Is it related to building trust? And if you do agree with that, you know, what's the impact of that?
I'm going to give you an example. That's a true case for anything we do in life, any interaction that we make with anybody. I'm going to give you one outside of the boardroom and outside of my current job. And this is a hard thing for me to learn. I worked this is before I think I got my first job working in healthcare. And I was an adventurer. I'm a climber. I'm very safety oriented. I know what I'm doing. I know how to clip in and make my, you know, points and have 3 levels of safety and everything else. And I was working at a camp at a time, and I only knew one person there, kind of the boss who trusted me, knew a little bit about me. And she said, I want you on the high ropes course. Okay. And I was like, this is great. And the high ropes course is about 3 stories high. You climb up into a platform, and kids go up with you, and you clip them in, get them all safety in, and then you shoot them down a zip line, and they go screaming through the forest and end over there. And I said, this is great. I got this nailed. I'm awesome at this. So I got up to the top, and I was sarcastic, and I was being funny. I was young, and I didn't know how to present myself, and basically show them that I can do this. So what happened was, I went in with this attitude of, I know what I'm doing. I've got this. And they said, okay, fine, show us what you do. And I jokingly would, this is before the kids would show up, you know, they're testing me out. And this happens in business too. There'll be tests that they come about and test you. Anyways, so I'm up there on the platform, 3 stories high, and they said, okay, clip me in like you would clip in a kid. And I was just like, okay. So yeah, I'm gonna take this carabiner over here, and I'm gonna clip it where? Somewhere around here. And I knew where to do it. I was smart, but I had this, you know, just trust me attitude, and they didn't like that. And the end result of that was I was grounded. I was not going to do that. They did not have trust in me. Okay. People that know me intimately know that I'm trustworthy, that I have integrity, that I'm going to do the right thing for the organization, for whatever it is, and safety is a major concern. But I did not convey that. That was an extreme example. And that was a hard learning for me too, because that moment to go up there was, I would love to do this. I would love to facilitate it. And I used it not as a joke, but I was goofing around, and they told me to go on the bottom and do something else. And they had another facilitator up there. And so that was a learning moment for me, that if I cannot just let people that don't know me say, just trust me, I'll be fine. I have to show them that I am trustworthy. And by doing that, I have to go through the motions and talk to them, communicate to them, listen to them, what their concerns are, know who they are, just like being in that boardroom, listening to what their concerns are, and then presenting myself professionally. So that's my personal brand. So if you go back to personal brand, I hurt my brand in that organization, in that camp, as for me, I wanted to be trustworthy. I wasn't. So my personal brand became a jokester and someone who couldn't be trusted up there. And that hurt me. So that was a learning lesson outside. And that can be applied for anything that we do in life.
Yes, I definitely agree with you that, you know, how we apply building trust can be applied to anything we do in life. So I want to change gears now, really talk about careers. Before the call, I was speaking of your background, and I saw that you have, you know, extensive experience in online marketing, digital marketing, as well as web development. And I'm curious that now in your current team, that if I remember correctly, it focuses again on digital marketing. Um, what are you looking for a new team member that comes on your team as it pertains to their presence?
A lot of things. I want to make sure that so if I got a new team member that comes in, it's almost kind of go through an interview process. And so what am I looking for to bring somebody on my team? A lot of things. They got to mesh within our team. They've got to have a good personality. They've got to be smart. So if they're already coming to the table, they already know what they need to do. So I'm not so much worried about the skills. We can teach those technical skills or fill in the gaps where they need to be. But I think for me, one of the top ones would be listening with complete attention without having any distractions again. That in the interview itself is going to portray, just like when I was up on that high ropes course, that was an interview. They're seeing if I'm listening to them and giving my complete attention and doing the right thing. So if I'm interviewing somebody, it's going to show most likely their behaviors that they're going to have in the future. Right? Mine was an extreme example that I corrected it and said I can't do this again. That hurt me. I had self-awareness and moved forward. But listening without complete attention, without distraction. An example of this would be when I was new. I always go back to myself. What did I do? What made me successful in my first job? Why did people take me? My first project I was given was from my boss. First job that I had working in healthcare, and he put a piece of paper down in front of me. It was a half sheet, and he said, "I want you to work on this project. It's really simple." And build it for me, and then we'll take it to the customer. So I looked at it and I built his little recommendation. It was a little form that I built, and I said, okay, here it is. And he goes, all right, good, looks good. Now take it to the customer, make sure it's good for them. So I went to that customer for the first time, never talked to him before, and I started to get the requirements from them and found out that it was more that was built out than what my boss had put in there. So I started to then interview the VP of, I forgot what department she was at, this was many years ago. And she said, yeah, this is good, but this is not what I was looking for. I was looking for something else. I thought I gave you guys the right specs for this. So she was a little disappointed with what I built. And I said, all right, let's take a step back. So then I just sat there and listened to her. I said, what's important to you for this project? What is this? And she started going about all the key points with it. And eventually I scoped out 5 to 10 pages of what this thing would be. And slowly through the iteration of building this, it went from a little tiny project that, take a day to months of a build that launched, and people were afraid on this VP's team that the program that I was making was going to replace them. But in actuality, it was going to free up their time. That wouldn't have been successful if I didn't listen to the customer's needs, and the customer in the sense was the VP. That I'm looking for someone to do that same thing. Listen to whoever is requesting something. Go back to them. Don't just build something off of an email or, I'm smart, I know what they're talking about. We don't. We need to go to those individuals, walk into their offices one-on-one, get in front of their face. Don't have any distractions, like I said before. Don't have a phone with you. You can have your phone with you, but don't look at it. Don't look at your time. Go in. And these VPs, directors, they'll be if they want something from you, they'll drop everything. I've walked into offices and be like, hi, I got a quick question. I don't want to bug you. And they're like, oh, hold on. I'm hang up the phone, and they sit down, and they'll talk to me. And it's a wonderful experience. And I just sit there and I listen to them. And then I gather up all the stuff. And in this case, it was most cases when you're listening to people and you bring them along with the journey, listening with your complete attention without distraction builds that trust, builds your personal brand. And in this case, it was very successful. When I left the organization, that program continued for quite a while, and that was very satisfying. So, what to say about that?
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying like your level of composure coming in, and your ability to compose yourself really tells people whether they should trust and respect you. That's pretty much what I got from that story and that message. It was really excellent. So I'm curious, what do you say to someone who's more introverted? If they're currently working in a role that doesn't really require them to interact with a larger team or with leadership on that scale. So what should they do, or why should they even care about their ability to present better or project themselves in a better light?
It's a good question. So you're an introvert, and so you don't need to talk to leadership. Well, I'll contest that you report to somebody, right? Whoever you are in the organization, you're reporting to somebody. And so you have a leader above you. And it might not be the leader that is requesting the services of you. So it's that person in between. So you still need to communicate clearly what you are doing to your leadership and your peers. So being an introvert, I was naturally an introvert in high school, and I broke out a little bit more in college and started to get a voice. I didn't talk to people. I sat down and I became a programmer, and I developed and I started typing away and getting all my stuff down. And that's just the way it was. So being able to clearly communicate your message so that your stakeholders can receive it is key. when I was, let's say the last year was a little bit more than a year. So I was in a year phase when my organization, AMITA, when I was brought into AMITA through Presence Health. And the first thing that I had to do was pretty much a year of integration work. So I had programs that did the same thing in my area in 3 separate buckets. So one of them, again, was to find a doctor. It's always the biggest one with me. So we had to find a doctor that was sitting in one system in relay care, and another system, it was LVM. So I need to communicate up to leadership what we're doing so they understand, because the executives always think, just get it done. It should be easy. It's data. You have doctors' first names, last names, everything over here, and it's repeated over here. So just merge them together and turn it on, and you have one directory. Simple, but it's not, right? So I need the folks, the associates below me doing the work, the experts that are in those 2 databases from 2 different systems. When I come in, I need them to clearly communicate with me what they're doing and why. And in this case, I had an excellent team on both sides. They were extreme experts at this, and they worked with their vendors too to help out in the builds of what needed to take place. And so it's my job to communicate to the executives. So they don't need to communicate to the executives and say, we're doing this and that. They need to communicate to me, and the vendors need to communicate to them as well too. And I'm relying on that. If I can't rely on you, then I have to do the work, and I'm not the expert. I have no idea how that works. So there was always constant communication with the process. My team would check in with me. I would check in with them, and we'd course correct and go back to the vendor. So there's a lot of communications going on. And then I would level that up to the executive team and let them know, they always like dates. So they said, we're going to go live on July 1st. And I know that I can't go live on July 1st because of a technical glitch that we have over here that we didn't see from a scope build. Then I am going to do my best to get that information of why that is and get it to my executives and say, all right, this is going to impact cost or a timeline, and what would you like to do? We can keep going down this course. And so in this case, it took a couple extra weeks, and I'm glad we did, because if we would have launched when I said we wouldn't have been successful. We would have had to play catch up and clean it up. Everything would have been fine. Not everything. I'm always optimistic that there would have been things wrong. Our customers wouldn't have been satisfied. But we took that extra time, and because we were able to clearly communicate messaging to and from me in different ways, that was key. So being an introvert, you can be an introvert, that's fine, but you got to learn your voice of how to at least talk to your boss and communicate what you're doing and why it's important. And I'll put a last one in there too. If you see something that is not right, it's unethical, it's going to hurt the organization, you need to have that voice and you need to communicate that, because if it's not communicated well, you're the expert in this area. But if you don't communicate that to me and we go live with something and it breaks and something gets breached or whatever, in healthcare, it's always bad if we have a little open door and somebody gets into our information, then that's going to look bad on our team. It's going to look bad on me. It's going to look bad on you. Did I lose my feed? Can you see me still? Oh, okay. So that's what I would say.
I can see you.
Okay.
Okay, great. So, yeah, and what you mentioned about, how things could impact company goals. You mentioned cost. You mentioned hitting timelines, and all of that aligns toward hitting project goals, which are related to organizational goals, whatever the organization bottom line goals are. What's your vision between building your personal brand, aka your executive presence, and how it aligns with, the company's bottom line goals, or at least what are your, personal thoughts on, executive presence and how it aligns with the overall bottom line goals for your organization?
It's a good question. So, everything rolls up into how people perceive you, right? So your personal brand, my personal brand could be a goof. My personal brand could be expert in my field, and we want this guy on our team. We want him at the table, right? One or the other is not bad, right? You can be a goof. You can have a personal brand as a goof and make it work for you. But what are your objectives? What are your goals? Where do you want to be, right? And where do you sit? I sit in an organization that likes suits and ties. Healthcare is still that old school way. You look at other industries in tech, they're, jeans and bring your dog to work, and there's a beer garden around at the corner, all these other things. So how do you want to portray yourself? So in our organization, we want to portray ourselves as, how the way I portray myself is going to be the way that they trust me. And if they trust me, then I'll be able to sell what I'm trying to say better to them. If I come into work with my hair all crazy, and did this when I was right out of college, I know what I'm doing. I'm a great programmer, et cetera, et cetera. And my executive presence was, I'm a young kid. Yeah, he's great at what he does, but we don't want him in the boardroom. So do I want to be in the boardroom? Do I want to be part of that team? If I want to be part of that team, then I need to listen. I need to have composure. I need to not, be getting emotional with every little thing that comes up, which is something we didn't touch on here yet. Need to contribute as well too, and continuously learn. So those are all part of building your executive presence and your personal brand. And so what are the goals of the organization when you say you want to align with it, your bottom line goals? You have to align those together. So that's what I have to say about that.
No, it actually sounds like good advice to try to figure out a way to align your personal efforts, maybe where you see yourself in a few years. And
Yeah.
that's just the way I'm thinking. The way you see yourself in a few years and what you can potentially learn or bring to the organization that allows you to meet your personal goal as well as meet any of those bottom line goals, whether it be um, being able to sell better, as you mentioned earlier, or as we mentioned earlier, so that your company is selling better, building your own personal selling skills, or how to realign company operations to bring down cost. All that is part of meeting the company's bottom line and learning skills that you can then apply to your future efforts. Last question I have before I actually start opening questions to the audience is, what tips do you have for either individuals who are new in their career, or transitioning in their career, or just are interested in building their executive presence? What tips do you have for them on how they can build their personal brand in their executive presence?
It's a good question. The first one that comes to me is listening. So what I would say, how I've learned it is a combination of listening and learning. So if you're coming new into something, what I like to say is, there's so many things I could talk about in this area. Find the people that are in the area that you want to be in, or that you want to improve upon, and get notes off of them. Find out where they have succeeded, and what do you say, like, where they succeeded, replicate those in your world, or work to replicate those in your world, and find out, more importantly, where they failed and why they failed. Like one of the examples I gave was, just because you know something in your head, and I've been an expert at tying kids into ropes, the way I presented myself wasn't. So you learn that, learn where those common pitfalls were for where you want to be from individuals who are already there, and then avoid those as much as you can. You're not it's not going to be 100%, but do your best to, I would say, do your best to do that. So that takes a level of listening and slowly learning. You're not going to boil the ocean, but take those little key moments, those little tiny moments of takeaways from other people's lives. And I'll give you one example of how I do this in so many different ways. There's so many different ways to do this. But where I sit right now, I get a lot of vendor emails that come in, and they say, I want to sell you this, I want to sell you that, and the schedule's all clogged up, and I can't get all these people on here. And so what I've done, and I've implemented a few years ago, was a two-step process. One, if a vendor's trying to get to me and try to sell something that is in my area that makes sense, I will schedule them for a Friday every month and push all the vendors into one day that makes sense, not just willy-nilly, the ones that make sense. And so when I talk to them and I have a good rapport, I get this good feeling about them, and we have a good conversation, I will ask them, how has your product succeeded? How has it not? And how is it going to work for us? I start thinking that. And then on top of that, I ask, who do you work with that's like me in other organizations across the country in healthcare in the same vertical? And they'll give me names, and I put those names. And once a month, I'll pick one of those names and call them up, and then I have a conversation with them. And that's a big insight that I get there too, because then I'll see how their org structure is done, how they operate, what was successful, what wasn't. And we see that there's a lot of commonality there of we're trying to solve the same problems in different parts of the country, and maybe somebody was successful right here, and I can say, oh, I'm going to try that, I didn't think about that. Or somebody was not successful and I was going to go down that road, we were going to try that, and they said, no, stay away from it, we tried it, we did it, and this is how you did it. And you can assess that and get more detail into it. But that really helped me as a newcomer into anything, any kind of learning something new. You start small and you build up big with that.
Excellent response. Excellent. So let's jump into some of the questions from some of the audience members. Suquint Core had a question, wanted to get more information about your career transition. Suquint, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Eric. Thank you. First of all, thank you
Hello.
so much for taking time and sharing your experience. And
Yeah,
I'm sorry I couldn't join in early on. I was in another session trying to help other fellow students
that's awesome.
get accumulated with the IMBA program, which went really well. It was a good session. So I've been a programmer for last 20 years, and I was very happy. I love programming still. And in fact, at one point in time, I did write an electronic medical record keeping software as well for a doctor. That was almost 19 years back. And he was the visionary. The only problem was that, and the software we were using, the software in his office, I was adding more enhancements to it. The only thing was that he was in the business mind. I wish he would have put in more energy and money into it, and he could have done something with that product. I don't know if something happened or not after I left. But when I was there, we sold the product to two other doctors, two other offices.
Nice.
So
Nice.
it was good, that whole time, that transition, how moving from paper to electronic, great. So after now here I am, working in IT for 20 plus years. Like, where do I want to go from here? And I do see it's like, the grass is greener on the other side. So I'm thinking, what, it'd be nice to be in a situation where you make the decisions, and you are somebody, you tell people to do stuff. So I see that you mentioned that you were a programmer. um, how did you transition? I'm trying to do an MBA to see if I can transition and learn from here. build on top of my existing skill set and maybe make a bigger impact in my organization. I don't know if you want to share your story, how you did it.
Yeah, I can. I think, I attribute it to a lot of luck and being in the right place, is how I look at it. Other people will look at it other ways. But I was in IT. I'm a jack of all trades. So being in college and high school, I just learned as much as I could about everything. And I was an introvert, so I really didn't want to talk to people. I just wanted to do things. I wanted to build things. And I found my love of programming at my second college, when I learned PHP and SQL and databases and what you can do with all that stuff, which is amazing. And so I started taking little steps of becoming an expert at that and building things. And in the back of my mind, I always wanted to be in management, but I wasn't pushing for it. I was happy with what I was doing. I was happy with what I was programming. I was just moving along. So in that, I was building my executive presence, my personal brand. I was talking to a lot of people. I was talking to executives. I was getting people to know me and trust me. And I think, looking back, that is what has really helped me move forward in life for what I would call my lucky moments, in a sense. So building that presence helped me when the organization that I was in, I started at Previna. It was called Previna. And then we were merging with Resurrection. So Previna and Resurrection came together. And at that moment, I was in IT. I was, I think, the only, or there was another gentleman that I hired. We were the only ones running the internet and the intranet for the organization. So the internal website and the external website through IT. So when we merged, they said, you have skills on both ends here. We're going to take the internet, and we're going to move that to marketing, because that's more of a marketing function. That's where it rests on the other side of the organization. Or you can stay here. And I started learning, what was it? SharePoint, because SharePoint's a lot internally.
Yes, that's where I specialize as well.
Right? And so I started learning. I was a cold fusion developer for many years, and on the other side, and marketing side, they were still going to do cold fusion. So I said, you know what? The IT side of it is just it felt like it was dying. It didn't have good leadership. And I didn't know what it was. So I said, okay, I'll entertain the marketing side. I don't know anything about marketing. Zero. I didn't know what A2B or B2B was, all these terms that I eventually learned. And so I was brought over there and quickly, started working next to web developers again in Cold Fusion. Everything started picking up, and this was great. And I said, I reported to a guy who was just like me. And so he was my boss. And I said, oh my gosh, I can do this. I can manage myself. Why wasn't I chosen for this? Mm-hmm. And I quickly learned that, okay, what are the skills to get to where he was at? So I started taking things away from him strategically. So I listened to what he was doing and why it was important. And we were setting up, he had this piece of software that he was setting up, and I just kept interjecting myself in there. How can I help you? What can I do? Try not to be annoying. But I started to learn slowly what it was that he did. Can I help you out? It was always my, thing. And so when I did that, I learned, and then I started making it my own. And I started taking an interest in it, and, not the expert, but he saw that I had passion and drive. And he said, you take this. He goes, I see that you're doing this. Go ahead, run with it. I want you to lead this. And I was just like, sure, great, thanks. And I did that. And little by little, I started taking these chunks away. And then when he left, I said, I'd like that guy's job. And my boss went, no, you can't. You're not smart enough. And I was flabbergasted. And then they hired, so I wasn't a boss yet, right? I'm a leader in my own mind, but I wasn't leading anybody in an official capacity. So they brought somebody in from Google, because my boss was all about, you know, people that have high education and you know, they come from Google. So they put him in. Unfortunately, he was a fraud, and they saw through it. Well, eventually it all came out. So then he left, and I went up to my boss again, or you know, that boss, and I said, "I'd like his job, please." And they said, and she said, "Well, okay, you know what? Fine, just, you know, put your resume in." And she hired me, and I was amazed. I was like, "Oh, great. Okay, so now I'm over a developer, a couple developers. I start building it that way." And then that shortly after, a few months after, that boss that had just hired me, that said that I wasn't smart enough, she was let go. And then an individual came in that I had worked with in my previous life at another healthcare organization in the area. And she said, "Hey, this is awesome to see you." She's like, "I'd like you to interim lead the team." So here I am. I am in a trial phase, right? I'm up on 3 stories high, and I know what to do. And I got to make sure that I can, you know, show confidence and show that I can do this. And so I started, you know, I didn't get kicked off that post, that 3-story post that those kids were going to go down. So I'm in charge of now interiming the department, and then was eventually made the full-time person because they trusted me, and it just kept going, and I just kept moving along. And I say it's luck, because, and being at the right time at the right place. But before that was, how was I building my personal brand and my executive brand? Because in my first organization out of college, I was a goof. I was a know-it-all. I sat and programmed, and that's it. I didn't get up. A lot of times I was told, just sit there and do your job. And I didn't have that opportunity to get out and build my executive presence in front of people. But I found those micro moments where I can do that. And I don't know if that helps, but
Great
that's how I
story.
kind of rose through.
I think I got some ideas from you know, I'm doing the same thing as you're doing, very slowly, but the next year I think I need to push it up, take it a notch a little bit. You know, I think I'm just trying to spread out into technologies, like I'm trying to do a little bit of AI, a little bit of business analytics, machine
Yeah.
learning, you know, all kind of crazy stuff. I think, and SharePoint too. You know, I went in there as a SharePoint, but I'm putting my hands into everything. I think I need to slow that down and do if this is the route I want to take. You know, how
Yeah,
you
if you want to,
described it, great.
is there an AI machine learning area that is starting to develop right now, or has been developed, and say, hey, how can I be part of this? You know, I can still do my own job right here, but you know, and you have confidence in me, I can still do this, but how can I help inside of there, right? Get in front of those right people.
Yes.
First, understand who those right people are, and
That's
then, yeah,
correct.
get in front of them. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Thank
Yeah,
you
good
so
luck to
much.
you. I think
Yeah,
that's awesome, and good.
thank you.
Excellent feedback. And it's interesting that you mentioned the background that you have and how you transition, because I have very similar background to you. I came from healthcare. I actually started as a coder and then moved my way up into the organization. And just want to share this with Suquint, is that 2 things that I found useful in my journey were Toastmasters and then volunteering for lead projects that I knew were going to have some type of executive or leadership exposure. And I was an introvert as a kid, and I got to a point where I knew I wanted to be in leadership. Um, Someone recommended, I think it was my uncle, recommended Toastmasters, and in Toastmasters you practice giving presentations, and that helped me build my confidence to just explain the technical piece to someone else. And over time, I then built the confidence to volunteer for more lead roles, and then let someone know, like literally, that I'd like to take on more responsibility. So Toastmasters and just letting people know I wanted to.
Yeah, good point. Good point. I did. We had a Toastmaster, so I did join, but unfortunately, because of lack of interest, they had to dismantle that group. But I see what you're saying. Yeah. So for the next year, my goal is, you know, make a list and start raising hand, and don't be scared. So good to know. Good to see. I was an introvert too. It's so interesting to see. You know, so we have to work extra to change it. Yeah.
You do. I think most programmers that I've met, or most techie people, tend to be introverts. Is what I've seen. There's extroverts. There's a lot of personality, and to Wylie's point too. I just joined Toastmasters, and I don't know what area you live in, but just in my hometown, in the town that I live in, there's 5 different Toastmaster groups in my city, and there's a ton. I'm outside the Chicago area. So if yours just disbanded, there might be another one that has popped up. And if you go on the website, you can find it. But I definitely encourage it.
It's just the time, this one was right
Yeah.
in our office. We were very comfortable, and I'm struggling with time, honestly. And I think that's what's happening with everybody in the company. It's a bigger organization, and we had that luxury. And I'm sure there's another one close by that I can in time once the MBA is done. Right now, I'm just over.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that's busy for you.
so I have to tell myself, like, you know what? Okay, I know that's the right thing, but not right now.
One thing at a time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But thank you. You appreciate it.
Thank you for that question.
Absolutely.
Ahmad Afandi had an interesting question about pain points. Ahmad, are you still with us? Do you want to ask that question?
Yes, for sure. Hello, Eric. Nice
Hello.
meeting you, and thank you for sharing. I just came a bit
Yeah.
late, and I work in Jakarta. I work also on IT, but mostly in telecom sector. And then I've been back and forth actually between managerial and technical. And then I'm not really introverted. I mean, like some of the discussion before. And actually quite outspoken about who I am. And some people say that I might be too detailed on many of the stuff going. So what prompted me going to IMBA is actually I have this experience of leading a transformation. It's not the intended position that I have to go, and I didn't know where to go at that time. And then it leads to probably the greatest failure of my career. What happened like 8 years ago when I was just 28, 29. And then it took me a while to recover from that and pursue this path of going to MBA. But living in you can say a second world. I'm living in Indonesia. There's not much of an option here like you have in the States. And then, of course, I couldn't sacrifice, the paycheck, you could say. So
Yeah.
maybe you could share. I mean, there must be some pain points of going from technical to managerial, and how you overcome those pain points. That would be good to have for me.
So your question, if I'm understanding correctly, is that how do you overcome your pain points when moving from a technical person to a managerial position, correct?
Correct. And then, okay, living in Indonesia, I mean, mostly we are handling the whole nation. It's 250 million. I'm spending my time like for 7 or 6 years in as a consultant. But then what I realized when I'm outside Indonesia is actually our country is really big. So outside you might be leading probably 10 or 5 people. How do you scale of from leading only 5 to 10 people to, for example, leading 200 or 300 people? How do you manage
Well,
to jump from that?
how do you manage to go from leading 5 to 10 people to 200 people?
Yeah, correct. I mean, because this is most likely happen when you're handling, I mean, nationwide operation in our
Right.
scale. Yeah.
Yeah. I just like anything, when you're learning something new, you're gonna start small and you're gonna build up from there. So you might not know how to lead 200 people, but you know how to lead 5 to 10 people. So take those same learnings and apply them to the 200-300 people. Now they're all not going to be transferable, right? It's going to be different. So when you talk about I think you managing transformational work, I believe. And when you're doing 200 people is going to be different. So if you're, let's just say, you're going to have to drop some processes that are, in a sense, wasteful, because they're not going to equivalent to managing 200-300 people. So, for example, if you're, if I want to get everybody in a room, 10 to 5 people, I don't know, if you're global, I don't know your footprint or whatnot, but I can easily get my whole team on in the room. I could say, well, it's mandated. You guys, there's only 5 or 10 of you. Come to this room, and I value the one-on-one time and looking at people and managing that way. Now, if we had to manage 200 people, it's not realistic to get everybody in the building. You could probably do it, but you got to maybe be the CEO, and you're fired if you don't come there. That's not going to happen. So what do? You have web conferences like this, and more strategic when they are. And web conferences like this too, I see, are popping up more and more, especially with one of our sponsors in our organization. They use the web a lot because they're national. They know they can't get everybody in the same room at the same time. So actually seeing people and their emotions and seeing that they're listening and how they compose themselves, that's gonna work with webcams and such. So you've got to shift your ideas, and while doing that, you've got to learn how it works, and doing that, find people who are going through that same thing. Just like I went through vendors and found my peers that were doing the same thing. Reach out to people. Wylie reached out to me on LinkedIn. I had no idea who he was, and he said, "Oh, this guy looks like maybe he can talk about something." So we hashed it, and he reach out to people, find people, and then they'll talk you through it and give the success and the failures that they've had, and hopefully that can build your knowledge base to move forward. I hope that answered your question. If I didn't, let me know.
Yeah. I mean, I get some of the point that you tried to say. I mean, about scaling up operation from 5 to about 200. But we are jumping on the question number 2 actually. I mean, do you have any pain point when you are jumping from technical to managerial? That one, the first question.
My pain points. I think one of my pain points, I really like developing, and one of the things that I was told by many managers was that you have to give that up. You don't have to, but if you want to be a successful manager, you're most likely not going to be in the weeds programming again. If you are, then you're not leading correctly, in the sense that if you're able to hire somebody to do that, to be the expert, okay, rely on them. So the pain point there is I have to know how to communicate between the programmer and the executive team of what's going on, because now I have a new audience. My audience is the executive team. My audience is not just my boss, right? So I have to, my pain point was to, while they're coding, and I look over their shoulder and say, no, you're doing it wrong. You got to do it this way, because I was the expert. A lot of technical people that move into management were experts in their field, and then move into a manager spot and don't know how to manage. They don't know how to deal with people. So you say, you're doing it wrong. This is how you do that. And that's demoralizing, and that doesn't work. So you have to, the pain point there is you have to know how to voice and work with that individual. When I was new in my organization, my boss came to me and he said, "Here, I want you to program that same program that I was telling you guys. It was a procedure master form. It very easy." So I put it together, and I was so proud of myself, and I took it to my boss. And he looked at it and said, "Well, no." And he took my code and he rewrote it right in front of my face. And I thought that was demoralizing. He could have showed me a different way. He could have said, "Well, you know what? Try it this way. It will still work. It doesn't have to be perfect, but he could have talked me through it a lot better. And we had those conversations. I almost wanted to quit. So when you're doing those, think of those moments that affected you with your manager. And if your manager was treating you wrong, like you felt like, oh, why did he rewrite my code? He could have just gave me some pointers. Then take that in your head and apply that to the people that you will eventually lead and manage. Don't make those same mistakes. That's what I would say to that.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Eric.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for your question.
Anytime.
And good luck.
Great question. And I'm going to share a pain point that I had to learn the hard way was when I was transitioning from just a technical role to a more managerial role, is understanding that it's more than just my job. You know, when you're in the individual contributor role, I was so focused on doing my job that when I started to transition, I thought that it was just a collection of small jobs that we were all doing, and not seeing that slightly bigger picture and other business units that we touch, but I just didn't touch individually. So that was something hard to sometimes understand. And the way I kind of learned to get a better understanding of those other business units that I had to interact with is simply by asking those individuals that worked in those units to lunch. That way I gained a better understanding of their responsibility and then tie it back to what my team would do. So that's another pain point that I wanted to share. I have another question. I know we're over time a little bit, but Kushbu had an interesting question about job transitioning. Kushbu, do we still have you?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Feel free.
Hi, everybody. This is Kushbu. I'm here in San Diego, California. And my question was, so I'm a physician from India, and I moved to the US 10 years ago. I did start off with USMLEs, the usual process to get into residency and start practicing as a physician here in the US. Tried for a few years, the interviews and everything, the process is quite different here, didn't match. So I started looking at options. What else can I do? Research was always something that I had an inclination towards. So I started a job in clinical research, and that's what I've been doing for the past 6 years. Right, currently I work at University of California, San Diego, the Cancer Center. And over the past couple of years, I've realized that I want to move into the management section of it, managing projects, and then eventually, I don't know how far I can go. I'm still learning because mine is sort of a non-traditional route that I'm taking. That's not what I wanted to do, but now I'm learning more, and so that is what I want to do. And there's different sectors. There's academia, there's pharma companies, there's biotech company, and San Diego is huge in that sector. I'm trying to understand how do I present myself as a strong candidate, because I've managed a smaller site. These are clinical research sites that work with pharma companies on several research projects. So I have supervised about 5 or 6 people before. I've managed a whole project individually, but to make a big a big setup like a university here, you see the management to see that over here, that yeah, I can do it over here in a bigger setup too, or even pharma for that matter, because it's hard to even get interviews because when recruiters contact, or when we look at the job description, it's always about you should have a past experience of so many years, you must have a MBA degree, or you must. So how do I cross that hurdle? Because I really want to do it, and I know I can do it. And honestly, being a physician, we're managing different personalities and people all the time, whether it's the staff, it's all different kind of patients, the families. So it's not that we're not doing it. It's just not worded that way or not structured that way. I have given a couple of interviews in the past, but I see people always questioning. Uh, so I feel kind of stuck. They're like, "Oh, you're so overqualified. Why would you want to do it?" But then again, oh, but also you don't have this experience. So in my mind, I'm thinking, so what am I supposed to do? You think I'm overqualified. I think I can do it because I have done it. But then you also want this. How do I put all that together? It's just right now I don't know how to move forward because I see more failures than successes. And so I thought I really did want to ask you this question. Like, do you have any kind of guiding tips for me how to move forward with this?
I feel your pain.
Mhm.
There's going to be more failures than successes when trying to do this, and keeping that in mind is going to help you too, right? Because it sounds very relatable, right? I know I can do this job, right? You hear that a lot. I've got motivation, I've got this, I've got that. Are you portraying that to them correctly, right? And finding the right leaders that are going to hire you too is challenging, because we know as hiring managers, you know that you're not going to find someone perfect. If I have someone leaving my team, I'm not going to find someone who does exactly what they do, right? That is a known. If you don't know that, then you're unless it's a like specific push button technology, but that's not what management is, right? I was told early on in my life that if you have key management qualities, listening, compassion, being able to learn, having that, being able to contribute, et cetera, that you can manage anything. You can manage finance, you can manage IT and whatever else. Now it becomes challenging if you don't, that what you're bumping into is, well, you don't have that expertise, right? So how do you portray yourself, and what are those key points that you can tell them and give them confidence that you can do the job? So where have you been in life before where it's challenged you? You've overcome that challenge and you got that job, or you got it done. If you can convey that to the people you're talking to, right, and have those same stories, instead of just saying, just trust me, I can do this. Here's where I've done it before, and it's not in the same industry, but I didn't know how to do this, but I learned it, and I learned it by doing X, Y, and Z, and I either became an expert or I got to a certain point and moved on. But the point is that I can do this. So having your past experience, look back. It always challenges myself too, because I don't look back. Ask your family, ask your friends. That's always helped me. I was like, I don't know how to do this, and my dad will say, well, you've done it before, and here's how you've done it. This is what I've seen you do. My wife says the same thing. So listen to those people in your life that are close to you, that see your good bosses as well too that you've had. Ask them, how do I move on? What are those key points that you've seen me succeed that are going to help me in my next transition?
Another method is another two tidbits of advice. Is
Sorry.
just ask people for their story.
Yeah.
One method, similar to how I reached out to Eric. I reached out to Eric with the questions just to get to know him and to ask him for his career story. You'll find that when you do that, they'll get to know you and like you, and then that's going to be more of a reason to encourage them to invite you in for opportunities, career opportunities. And another thing to consider is something called a value proposition letter. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but if you're not, it's a short letter
Okay.
that you write that identifies your key value points in a short letter form. You then send that out to a prospective hiring manager, and it's going to help differentiate you among a long list of candidates.
Okay.
So it's something I definitely encourage to look up online.
Uh-huh.
And if you wanted to touch base with me on how you could strategically use something like a value proposition letter, feel free to reach out to me.
Oh,
I
sure.
can tell you some of the stories of what I've done in
Uh-huh.
consulting and how it's been useful for me.
Great, great. Thank you. Thank you so much, both of you. I really got to take away some really great points today. I so appreciate all of the suggestions and tips that you've given, and I'll definitely try connecting back and getting some more information on those. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
So we're over time. Eric, any last minute tidbits of advice or closing thoughts?
Be yourself, keep learning, and keep building your personal brand, and you're going to go places.
All right, be yourself, keep learning, keep building your personal brand, and you're going to have executive presence that's going to get you the career advancement that you're looking for. All right, I'm Wylie Blanchard, and this is Great Tech Pros. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Eric, I thank you very much for joining us. It was a pleasure, sir.